What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. We'll be covering rookie quarterbacks and their value shifts today, kind of doing a review of these guys through half of the season. I think it'd be fun, especially when we're talking about Superflex and Dynasty. So we'll start with CJ Stroud. Absolute dominant performances last week, historic performance, 30 for 42, 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I know there's been a lot of talk out there of where we rank him in Dynasty. So when we're looking at just overall quarterbacks, Tier 1, it's been Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Herbert-ish. Hurts is in there, Lamar in the area. But just how far should we have CJ up there? Where do you have him at, Jeff?
He's my quarterback 7. So right now I've got it. My top 7, top 8 go Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence at 5, Justin Herbert at 6, CJ Stroud at 7, and Lamar Jackson at 8. Tua at 9 and Anthony Richardson at 10, and Justin Fields at 11 is where I'm sitting right now. So it just feels like a good spot. I think that it's tough to weigh him against Lamar Jackson, but I am a little bit. We just haven't seen the big boom games. I feel like this year from Lamar Jackson. He looks good in that new offense, and he's moving the ball very, very well. But they're blowing teams out, and they're not having to use Lamar. It's there, so weighing the age there and the way that CJ Stroud has looked, like I think that you still put Trevor Lawrence above him in terms of prospect level. And that's kind of land there. And so that's kind of feels like the natural landing spot where I have him.
I'm a little higher. I have him at QB6. And mine looks a little bit different at the top as well. So I have Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Herbert, Burrow, and then Stroud. And I put out a little poll on the old X or Twitter or whatever we call it now. Who would you rather, CJ Stroud or Joe Burrow? There's like 600 votes or something, and it was only 60-40 in favor of Joe Burrow. Now, this is obviously coming off of CJ Stroud's massive performance, and before Burrow's game, I think part of it kind of, was leaning into that game. But I think there's a real conversation. I mean, CJ Stroud's 22 years old. He's performing like the best rookie quarterback I've ever seen. I know the stats won't really reflect that in terms of like actual counting stats. His 14 touchdowns are not going to break records probably. Justin Herbert's probably going to keep that rookie touchdown record. And I don't necessarily know that CJ Stroud's even going to get to the Baker Mayfield level. But what CJ Stroud is doing is he is taking care of the football and he is putting the team on his back and carrying the team. And I think that's the difference between most rookie quarterbacks and what Stroud is doing is they aren't winning with him. They are winning because of him. And if he's a because of guy already 8 games into his NFL career, I feel pretty confident saying that this is going to continue. We might be talking about him in the top 3 to 5 here soon. I'm not there yet, but I think conversations may be had because he's in the MVP conversation for the NFL MVP conversation. I think he's already locked up Rookie of the Year. I think he's got MVP on the horizon.
Yeah, I think, you have to like what you've seen from him so far. He did, he had that game against the Panthers, which was weird, where he had 140 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Like, I think he's still a rookie. So when you're thinking of like, there's going to be games like that, and the Panthers did a good job against him. But yeah, I think when you're thinking about the rookie guys, it's interesting that Stroud is going to jump all these guys and kind of be like, now, when you think of quarterbacks and rookies, you're worried about their value. All right, maybe you see the potential. Where do you rank him? Nah, he's pretty much top 10 guy already. Like, even Richardson has question marks because what we saw from Richardson was really good in fantasy. Does he stay on the field? I think the injuries and everything there. Now he, again, hadn't played that many games in college. Now he hadn't played another season in the NFL. Where CJ, you feel pretty comfortable about. We're going to talk about Bryce in a little bit, unfortunately for me, and the concerns that we have for Bryce. But with CJ, like, I don't know if we have those. And he's elevated that team. Tank Dell looks legit. I don't know if we want to talk about Tank Dell, but he looks really good. Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, those guys. Like, those guys are there. And I wouldn't call, I don't want to be disrespectful, but those guys aren't like world beaters. Like, if he gets a real wide receiver 1 coming in, and possibly as soon as next year, if they are very aggressive in the free agent market or whoever's out there, what if we had T. Higgins with CJ Stroud? Like, what if these guys come and they get on this roster? You could be talking about CJ Stroud making that top 5 argument. Anything else just overall on CJ before we dive into the trades?
Well, I think talking about the wide receiver one is an interesting path to go down, because I think that as you look at Tank Dell's ability and Nico Collins' ability, yeah, they're producing right now. But if you put a true wide receiver one there, T. Higgins is a great candidate. I mean, when you look at the ties with C.J. Stroud, some of the receivers that he's played with in the past, between Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, these types of players that we've seen in these wide receivers in the NFL, there was that big rash where they really dictated where they wanted to go. And so if you got a guy like Garrett Wilson, maybe he gets frustrated, or Chris Olave kind of seems like he's headed down that path of getting frustrated in his current situation. If they say, hey, I want to play with my guy, I want to play with CJ Stroud, that's a potential avenue. Not having the first round pick hurts them in that regard a
Yeah,
little bit. They still have the Browns first round pick, I believe, because of
they
that
do.
trade.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're going to be right. I mean, give them like a Keon Coleman or a Roma Dunze, and yeah, like let's go.
Another name that just does not get talked about in the same vein as T. Higgins, but very much so in the same situation, Brandon Ayuk. The 49ers can't
Yep.
pay all these guys, so it's either Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel. I don't see a world in which both of them are on the team long term. I think the 49ers might be smart to capitalize on some of the value that I think Ayuk has, although I do think Ayuk is their wide receiver one, and I think they should pay him. But I think we could see that situation kind of turn sour quickly, and it could be. Do you guys remember when Stephon Diggs was a Viking, and then it was very quick, and then he was not
Yep.
a Viking, and the same thing with Tyreek Hill. Obviously, things happen behind the scenes that we don't know, but I would monitor that too, because a guy like Ayuk, to me, I would rather a guy like Ayuk than a guy like T. Higgins to be the wide receiver one for CJ because of how good they are after the catch. We already know that Stroud can put balls perfectly down the field, 40, 50 yards. Tank Dell can kind of fill that role. I think that would be the role that T excels in, but I think IU can do some different things for them too.
I don't know. I love T. I think when T's healthy, he's one of the best wide receivers out there, and consistently. And I think in this scheme, he would fit really well in terms of what they like to do. But yeah, I think any of these guys that we're talking about, if they get there, it elevates Stroud. I think that's what we're. So I don't see his value dipping below where he's kind of at. Like quarterback 7 is probably where we mostly have him, and quarterback 6, 7. Like it would take a really hard fall for CJ to fall down there. So you're pretty solidified. If he's your QB2, he's now your QB1. And if you have one of these other guys and you were rebuilding, but you had a solid quarterback, you're ready to contend. Like you're ready to go. Like don't, necessarily, don't worry about there's your quarterbacks now. Now you got to go out there, grab those wide receivers if you haven't already. And then now it should be time for running backs next year and the offseason, kind of looking and get those bargain guys. When we go into, the trades that we've seen for him, this happened recently. And with Kyle Murray coming back, I thought it was an interesting kind of trade. So Stroud for Murray and a first. So I get it from both sides. Are we to the point where you're comfortable giving up Murray and then adding a first to that side to get Stroud? I think Christian is. Are you comfortable with that? You hate Kyler Murray, though. So that's also the other part.
I don't hate players. I hate their game,
You
literally.
hate him
Uh,
pretty. I mean, if you're gonna say anybody, I think you
he,
just hate Call of Duty.
yeah, maybe. No, we haven't seen Kyler play in like a real offense yet, and so I do want to have some pause on Kyler. And as far as fantasy goes, I will say I think that the offense out in Arizona, I think he'll excel in that.
Yeah.
I think it might take some time. I think we could see a Kyler value decline down the stretch here because we've never once again we've never seen this. So if he steps right in and operates that offense at a high level, then maybe I'll change my tune a bit, but yeah, I would do Kyler in a first for Stroud right now pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not Caleb Williams, but yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, next ones we have here: Stroud. I'm assuming Kirk Cousins, Jamal Williams, a 25 third for Nick Chubb, Tua, and Pittman. Oh, Christian Kirk. My bad. So let's mix that. Stroud, Christian Kirk, Jamal Williams, a 25 third for Chubb, Tua, and Pittman. Tua's an interesting one. He's hard because I think the narrative of like not playing well against good teams is I don't know if I think it's a real thing. It's a question mark there. I think the timing thing is off for that Dolphins offense at times. Where are you leaning on that deal, Jeff?
I think give me the Stroud side. I mean, and looking at it, I mean, unless you're really buying in on Pittman, I think Pittman and Christian Kirk probably are a little bit of a push in my mind. Probably lean Pittman, but not enough to make up that difference. I don't know. the concern long term about Tua is always going to be there until he plays long term is part of it, and how fast we've seen CJ Stroud come in, whether Tua can keep up that fantasy production when Tyreek Hill does fall off, that's another question relative there. It just seems like you've got, as much as Tua, I like him and he's extending, and I buy into him more on Dynasty than I think many people do. I still want the Stroud side of that. But I mean, I think that's a good trade if you're looking to move off of Stroud or cash Stroud in and try to. It's not exactly win now pieces because Nick Chubb's involved, but at the same time, it's not win now pieces.
It goes back to the win because of versus win with. And I think right now I'm not comfortable saying that the Dolphins are a win because of team with Tua. And there is a large contract situation brewing with Tua that no one's talking about it. I don't really know why. I think the Dolphins are trying to make sure that no one talks about it because I don't know that the Dolphins really know what they want to do with that. And I would be hesitant to get off of Stroud and move to Tua and assume that my team's going to be okay. Plus, I think Kirk is an upgrade to Pittman. Maybe even in Dynasty, but definitely for this year. So I think the actual win now side might be the Stroud and Kirk side, and so I'll take that side.
Yeah, there's probably no part of me that would trade Stroud for Tua in any mindset just because of the concerns overall with dynasty value. Because Tua's is only going to go down. I don't see a scenario like where Tua's value is at right now compared to where it's probably going to be next year. This is a ceiling, in my opinion, because people are always going to be concerned no matter what. And there's always going to be a question mark whether or not he can play. You're going to see the flabby balls in like preseason where he can't throw it. And then you have Stroud over here breaking records. Like, I just don't. I'd be very concerned if I was giving up the Tua Pittman side, or I was getting the Tua Pittman side, and I don't want Chubb at all. Like Chubb to me that's not a buy worth buying right now in terms of this. The next deal is Stroud for Anthony Richardson and a first. Whew, this one's fun because if you still think Anthony Richardson's a top 10 guy, then you get a first to pair with it. Like I could see either side on this. Like I'd have a hard time giving up a first and Anthony Richardson for Stroud. I think I don't know if you really have to. This is definitely paying for it. This is fun. This is a really fun one. I'd probably lean with the value with Richardson at first. Like if I'm rebuilding, hey, I'll take the first as well. Here you can have Stroud. I think Richardson can be a top 10 guy. Plus I get the asset. So I get that side. But where are you at on this one, Jeff?
So you drafted your rookie draft, what, like 6 months ago now, or around that time frame, and you drafted Anthony Richardson above CJ Stroud. To give up a first to trade a player that you drafted above a guy when we've seen Anthony Richardson be a fantasy producer, I don't have any questions about him producing when he's on the field. He's going to be a quarterback one moving forward. We've already seen it, and he's going to be there in that fantasy term. And so I think that this is getting a little bit buyer's remorse maybe on how you use that pick, but that is a steep price to pay to include another first. It's tough doing these blind because you don't know where that first is going to land. But if you're talking about you took Anthony Richardson or you ended up with Anthony Richardson, if it's your own first, then obviously your team was bad last year. And so, maybe you turned it around pretty quickly, but at the same time, I do think that there's a lot of value in talking a couple things about Stroud, because one, I think there's value in identifying tiers. And when you look at last year, there was kind of 6 players in that top tier in Superflex. And Stroud kind of in a lot of leagues gravitated towards being that 6th player as things went on with Jahmyr Gibbs. Once he got drafted, people were moving Stroud way down, even behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think that seems like we're running into this cycle where when Justin Herbert came out, the similar thing happened. He moved back, and then there was a major adjustment to say, hey, we can't let these quarterbacks slide anymore. And then I think that you got like a Zach Wilson was kind of landing in there, Trey Lance, people felt burnt on that. So then like they allowed the quarterbacks to slide a little bit again. And so like you've got this push pull in Dynasty where Superflex, where I think probably next year you'll see all the quarterbacks go at the tippy top again because of what you've seen from Stroud. But the instructive thing on that is being comfortable moving within those tiers. And if you're able to operate within that tier, if you're sitting in that tier and you're willing to move back and recoup future capital, I mean, it would be crazy if somebody had given you a first to move up to get Anthony Richardson, you still walk out with CJ Stroud, and then you're able to flip that around and still get Anthony Richardson in a first months later. I mean, like deals like that. first are flying around in the league like that, then be that willingness to identify your tier and work within your tier and move back, I think is how you recoup a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen Anthony Richardson arguably be a better fantasy quarterback when he's on the field. He's averaging 17.7 fantasy points per game this year, and he didn't finish but one of them, I think. And and so yeah, I think we can make a clear argument that he'd be in the 20s or close to it. Maybe 19.8 maybe, which is right where CJ Stroud is sitting. So I think, yeah, I'll take the first with Anthony Richardson. I have them back to back in my dynasty rankings at 6 and 7, and I'll take Richardson.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think that's okay if you're gonna do it that way, and then you have that value. Last one, real quick. We'll get if we get this, then we'll jump up to the other quarterbacks. Stroud for DK Metcalf and 2 firsts, a 24 first and a 25 first. I think the question is, I mean, DK is pretty much a solid wide receiver too right now. Like, I think overall, Geno's kind of struggling. What does that offense look like? So are you willing to play 2 first for Stroud right now? That's, I think, the question. Because DK, yeah, I mean, I'd throw him in if I had to. Do you think it's 2 first right now, Christian?
I think you can make an argument that it's 3 firsts, and I think I maybe that's what DK's worth. I probably wouldn't throw a first around for DK Metcalf personally. I think he's like a high second. So in that regard, yeah, I think I'd still prefer Stroud here.
And 2 firsts. I mean, yeah, I think I'm going to go with Stroud too, assuming that those aren't top first. And I think it's the other thing that's important to recognize is how much quarterback talent is coming into next year's class. We've already talked about Caleb Williams, Drake May, JJ McCarthy could end up there as well. Other guys could slide up. And so you got to be understanding of, if this trade were to be JJ McCarthy, DK Metcalf, and another first, and then JJ McCarthy is a top 10 pick and he lands in a nice spot and maybe lands in Atlanta or something like that. How are we going to feel about that trade like down the road?
Just get the elite asset in Stroud because you can always move Stroud later for something. Like the way I look at those deals is like, hey, those 2 first, like you just said, could turn into poo poo, right? Like it's not going to work, and then you lose that value. You get Stroud, you're always going to have that kind of in the back of your pocket, and you can still move him. And there's always going to be a guy that believes in Stroud or believes in Richardson. These guys. So yeah, I would say Stroud. I think he is worth that if you're going to go for it, and you get that quarterback. And then yeah, you can move him later. Like that's just the way that you you work there. But before we move on, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with any questions, trades, or thoughts on the topic.
Also, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content for less than $15 monthly or $70 annually. We have the best Dynasty content in the fantasy football industry. Join today. It was a rough night last night, guys. I went to the Bills-Bengals game, and I was up pretty late, so I apologize for my performance here tonight. I'm very tired, and my voice is really struggling, so just to peek behind the curtain a little bit. And I'm wearing this Bengals shirt because my wife and my daughters decided they're Bengals fans, and they're trolling me, so I have to wear a Bengals shirt on the show tonight.
I enjoy that.
All right, let's talk about Bryce Young. So here's Bryce's weekly finishes in terms of what he's done. His best finishes was week 5 against Detroit, where he was a top 10 quarterback. Outside of that week, though, he is 23rd, 25th, 27, 17, 19, and 17. He has not been good. Bryce Young has not shown that. He has the 12th lowest passer rating, somewhere around there. 9th in terms of what you want to see from him. He's just been inaccurate. He had 3 interceptions against Indianapolis, and I kind of, I've mentioned multiple times, like I like Bryce. But I mean, one of his interceptions he had was a running back screen where he just completely missed the running back. Like there are things that Bryce is doing this year that is not, I guess, what I think his talent is, but he's definitely struggling. I don't know what it is, the system. I'm not sure kind of overall where you're at with him in terms of his dynasty ranking. I know I was looking at our rankings at Football Guys, like, I don't know. Does he sit at like I've seen him as low as quarterback 18, and I see some people still have him as quarterback 11. So I do think his value varies depending on kind of where you're at with him. Do we throw dirt on him early, or are we okay? Like, and I'll give my opinion later because I love Bryce. But where are you guys at, Christian? Where are you at with Bryce Young?
What we've seen hasn't been good, and I'll still rank him. I've got him at QB 12. I mean, like, this is way too early to make a judgment on a player that, maybe doesn't have all of the physical tools, and that's maybe why people are quick to jump off the boat, right? Like, he would have been an outlier if he came out and he was just dominant from snap number one. But I think a lot of us thought that the really smart football player that we saw in college was just going to translate over to the NFL pretty seamlessly. I think that there's still an opportunity for him to get that back. I don't like this system for him. I think his head is just spinning out there, which is not something we've ever seen from Bryce going back to high school. And so I would be comfortable giving him time. I have given Justin Fields every moment to get it right. I will gladly do the same with Bryce Young because I think he's a very talented football player that can command an offense and can kind of, like I said, the elite tools might never be there, but he's a smart football player. I think he returns to being a smart football player at some point, hopefully down the stretch. But if not, year two, I'm not quick to write these guys off personally.
I
Jeff is
agree.
though.
Well, I agree. He's a very intelligent football player. First, the physicality is showing up. I think that was a lot of people's big concerns, and it's obvious on the field that it shows up. And so, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's for fantasy purposes here. It's just probably going to be a little hot takey, but he does kind of seem like, for fantasy purposes, a fancy Brock Purdy, to be honest with you, because he's an intelligent quarterback. He's not giving you a ton in the rushing game. It does really feel like, absent like the Panthers really figuring this out very quickly and getting some real talent around him, you're just not, I don't know if you're going to see the 400-yard games or like the 475 touchdown like CJ Stroud just did. I don't know if that's his game. I don't know if that's how you want to use him in the NFL. Is kind of some of the concerns. So in that regard, like, that physicality shows up. Like, he's excellent. Accuracy is there, but it's been a struggle, and I think that he's just struggling to adjust to the game. He's I don't know. I mean, your best wide receiver is Adam Thielen, and Adam Thielen has been great so far this season, but absent that, it's so hit or miss on the talent that is around him. And you could say the same thing about CJ Stroud, but like you mentioned, CJ Stroud is elevating that talent around him, whereas Bryce Young, it just kind of seems like they're having to pull him along as best as they possibly can. And so those types of things are the concern. We've already seen him injured. That was a concern coming in. He got hurt week 1 or week 2. I forget which week it was, and he missed a game there. And so it's the physical things are showing up. And again, like, I think it's more of that really high-end game manager type player relative to the bigger quarterbacks that we've seen. Like, you look at the top of the Dynasty depth chart right here, you're either having rushing quarterbacks or these big guys like we're seeing Herbert tonight. We're recording on Monday night. Justin Herbert out here playing on Monday Night Football. Those types of players dot the top of the Dynasty quarterback list. And so players like Bryce Young just aren't there at the top of fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ready to call him Brock Purdy, but he definitely needs to get better. Like, in his last game, 3 interceptions, 4.4 yards per attempt is not good enough. Only 1 touchdown against a defense for the Colts that's not very good. Like, that pass defense, it's been bottom half of the league. But this is the first time he's thrown 3 interceptions in his pro or college career. He's never thrown 3 interceptions before. So, like, I do think that there's some growing pains here. I will say this though, when you're looking at what is one of the Carolina's big problems. Yeah, you talked about their lack of weapons. That offensive line has been very bad. Like, I think, he was pressured on 47% of his dropbacks on Sunday. He's just getting bull rushed. And you saw it multiple times, even in there in shotgun. And no matter what the scheme is, Brock has been struggling. Excuse me, not Brock. Now you got me saying Brock.
Oh no.
Bryce has been struggling in that mindset, and he's always going to be compared to Stroud. I think that's one of those things. And Stroud just went balled out this last week, so there's always going to be that. I saw like a big old headline at them comparing their stats and stuff. I don't think that's fair for the quarterbacks. I get it; it's going to happen. I think Bryce. I think we talked about it though. I think all of us, even me, who I love Bryce, just because I had him as QB1 for a long time, coming out of college. Like, Bryce has that ability to be like a quarterback, a high end quarterback too. Ceiling-ish. That's what we all said, though. We've all said that. Like, hey, he probably is a solid quarterback, too. these other guys definitely have more upside. That's why we talked about Richardson and Stroud having more upside. But Bryce can, I think, fix it. Like, I think if you're looking for what Bryce's ceiling could be, is that Detroit game without the interceptions. If he can have 250 yards and a couple touchdowns, I think you'll be okay with that and comfortable with that. I think if you draft him as quarterback 1, though, you're probably upset. If you draft him as quarterback 2 and you see Stroud doing what he's doing, then yeah, you're probably going to second guess yourself a little bit. But I'm not as concerned. But hey, Frank Reich, get your crap together. Like, as an offensive guru play call, what is going on there? But he's straddled to him though. Like, and I do know Tepper though is a little he's kind of like Mark Davis a little bit. Like, he might just fire him. Like, so there is that too. Like, there's part of that in there. So you understand when Dynasty, you have to have all context for everything. You need to understand the owner's a little crazy. You need to understand that their head coach, the offensive play called, have not been there. And again, remember, they gave up their first round pick. So they don't have, when you're thinking of who can they bring in? I think they will be aggressive in free agency. I think that they will try to go get him a wide receiver 1, 2. This is another spot for maybe T or some of these other guys to go. But yeah, I mean, what they built around Bryce was not good enough. And I think that's kind of really apparent, because I do think the one problem with his weapons is those guys, they struggle to really get open and create separation. Adam Thielen's a great possession wide receiver, but he's Adam Thielen and he's old and he can't create separation. DJ Chark is a great deep threat, not a very nuanced route runner, things that you need him to do. Jonathan Mingo has been a bust, straight up bust. And these other guys are just not there. So I think that is also the concern with them. So I do think that they can bring him back, but I get it. I understand where everybody's at with Bryce. Would you throw a random first at him, or are you concerned? Like, let's say it's mid to late.
I would give a late first.
Yeah.
In probably no doubt in 24.
Okay.
If I have a late first, if I'm a contender, if I lost Kirk Cousins or something like that, and I can get Bryce Young for my first, and I've been pushing towards the playoffs, like, I would do that deal.
Okay.
I don't know. And some of it's like, you make a great point there talking about the receivers that complement his game. He's excellent at one of the things that when Josh Allen was drafted, they put like Calvin Benjamin with him and like a couple of these other like bigger, slower guys. And Allen was basically like, hey, like I need guys that can separate, because that fits how I want to play. And so that's just one example. But understanding, once you got Bryce Young in the building, like maybe in free agency of the draft, you're kind of doing the best that you can. Once you got him in the building, get him the guys that he's comfortable playing with. We've seen him excel with Jameson Williams, who was a player that was able to create natural separation at Alabama. And even John Mechie was a little bit in college, was a pretty solid separator that relative to being one of these physical guys. And I think that that's kind of what he's comfortable with giving, because with Jameson, when you flash back to when he played with him, he did a very good job of putting the ball in position that Jameson can catch it and run without breaking stride, those types of things. That was where he excelled at. And so if you don't have those receivers that he can operate, that can separate, get in the ball and allow them to create afterwards, yeah, he's going to struggle. I mean, that's just not his game.
But the thing is like, he did throw with anticipation, and he threw into tight windows in college, and there's not even enough there for him to do that right now. And so I think this all comes back around to situation is very impactful. And I think a lot of dynasty managers incorrectly identified which set of weapons and which offensive line was going to be better in terms of Houston and Carolina. And so now we do what we will with that information. And I do think that the Panthers are at an uphill battle to improve this roster, just based on everything they had to give up to get Bryce in the building. So it's a catch-22 for them, but I'm still hopeful for Bryce. I think he's going to be a fine quarterback.
That's a great freaking point. Good job. I really like that point. We just missed. We thought that the Panthers' weapons would be better. Like, and I think Adam Thielen has been good. I think the auxiliary pieces around him and this running back room is, like
Terrible.
Miles Sanders, Hubbard, like they have been bad. Like, and so like Hayden Hurst is probably their best pass catcher. I mean, Thielen, yes, but like just having that reliable other area, and that's Dalton Schultz, and then you see the Nico and the tank and all that kind of stuff rise. So yeah, I agree, but I don't. There was another deal, Bryce Young straight up for Devonta Smith and Superflex. It's an interesting deal. Like, I'd take the quarterback, right? Or you take Devonta?
Depends what my quarterback room looks like. Depends. Yeah. I mean, that's probably depends where my competitive cycle is and what my quarterback room looks like. If I'm pretty flush at quarterback and I'm pushing to win right now, but I mean, you're kind of buying low. Like Devonta is like not exactly screaming in a sell window right now relative to the production that he's been putting out, and especially the way that he's looked with AJ Brown. Like, you can't feel great about the way that the obvious connection between AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts is there, and AJ Brown's not going to go away anytime soon. So, like I still lean, and a lot of it too is the windows that you're dealing with. And right now we are in a super high CJ Stroud window, but if we were talking 4 days ago or 2 days ago, when he was coming off 2 games of sub 200 passing yards, and he was looking like, okay, maybe that hot start was over. Like, it's just crazy to me how much the value fluctuates between days, like
Yeah.
performances week to week. And so, I mean, Bryce Young, if he goes out there and throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns next week against the Bears, I mean, he on Thursday Night Football in an island game, he is right back there again, and everybody's all in on Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Whereas, and if he goes out and struggles on Thursday night in the island game too, that value is going to plummet again. And it's crazy to me to play Dynasty that way. And I feel like a lot of leagues I operate in people are ultra conservative. Like, you can't really operate in those windows. But if you're in a league that does like do that, then have the long view and believe in your convictions and go and make some of these deals and take advantage of some of these people that are knee jerking to these things.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about a really knee-jerking prospect, Will Levis. So that's part of it. And when we talk about where he's been last 2 weeks, first week he came out just firing, 4 touchdowns. Everybody was talking about, hey, I was wrong on Will Levis. I was right. It was funny to watch. I enjoy seeing that concepts there. And he was QB6 overall, 26.6 fantasy points. Then against Pittsburgh, he came back to earth a little bit, 22 for 39, an interception. Weekly finish is 21. Okay. So I think the question is, what is his value? Like, where is Will Levis for a lot of us out there? Because, there's some crazy deals going on for him right now. So like, and you see it. And I think, like Jeff talked about, yes, there are some very conservative leagues for Dynasty, but there is also a lot of leagues that play it like redraft, if we're going to be honest. So like it's like redraft just a little heavier, and they understand that. For me, when I look at Will Levis, like, I struggle to really rank him right now because he's such a volatility of him is incredible. He's a quarterback too, but his head coach might not even like him. So like I just get concerned with overall his head coach might not like him. Value, where is he at? Will he even be there? Like, what does this team even look like? I mean, next year, will he have a new coaching staff? Maybe Vrabel's gone. Maybe he decides to take a different job, or if he does come back, if there's some inconsistency there, what does that value look like? What is your take on Levis, Christian?
My take is that we saw him play against Kenny Pickett, and I know which quarterback is better from watching those 2 players play. And so that influenced how I ranked him in my latest update. I think that I would prefer having Will Levis on my team instead of Kenny Pickett.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's a draft capital argument here. Will Levis fell to the 2nd round. Oh my God, so many picks in between the 2nd round and the 1st round. He can't be good now. But I also think that that's Vrabel's style, and he never shows his hand if he actually does like a dude. And I actually think, he was quick to blame Levis for some things this last week, but I think they feel confident that Levis is the future of the team. Now, do I think that he starts when Tannehill's back? No, I don't. And that's going to give you an opportunity, I think, to buy Levis, because the Titans don't really have a path to a quarterback. I mean, they could tank out this season and kind of be in range for one, but there's been a lot of talk about this quarterback class. I think it's very much so. There's a tier at the top of 2 guys in the NFL's eyes, and then after that, it's, throwing darts. And so I think the Titans would now rather go with Levis. I have him ranked at QB 21, I believe, just right after Sam Howell, who was also better than Kenny Pickett. I just love to throw dirt on Kenny Pickett's name because he's a terrible quarterback. But yeah, I mean, I feel kind of confident that he will start for them next year. So that just says a lot about the state of quarterback play in the NFL right now. That's good enough for QB 21.
He's my quarterback 18 in Dynasty, so I'm even higher than where you've got him, and that feels like a natural spot. It feels like a real breaking point to put him at quarterback 18 relative to some of the other guys around him. Personally, I think they would be crazy to go back to Ryan Tannehill unless the wheels really fall off of Will Levis. Biggest thing there is, from what I have seen from him, the moment's not too big. It doesn't seem like things are moving too fast. It's like the opposite of Bryce Young. His physicality shows up, and we know that he was a physical guy that should translate. He looks the part of an NFL quarterback, and so that's a lot of that. The composure, I think. I mean, a lot of the narrative around him, had he converted that last throw that ended up being an interception, and the Titans pull off that win. I mean, are you having a different conversation about Will Levis? And should it really break down to one throw about the conversation you're going to have about a guy? I mean, it's some of the stuff's just crazy. That the micro analyzation of one throw was off just a little bit, and so I'm going to pull him back like 5 spots in my dynasty rankings. And it's like, come on. And so, yeah, I think that what he's added to the offense in terms of verticality, given what Ryan Tannehill can provide, it opens up a different element, and you just create different scenarios for what Derrick Henry is going to be running into, what Tajay Spears is able to operate out of the catch. It just adds so many more elements to the offense from what Tannehill gave most week to week. And so I think that Titans need to be realistic about themselves. As much as they want to be contenders and push in, you're not going to catch Jacksonville in that division unless Trevor Lawrence gets hurt. And the odds that, I mean, I don't know that Buffalo is going to get a wild card, much less Tennessee is going to be a wild card team. I mean, come on, just play Will Levis.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think with Levis, it's just one of those things. Like, I think he does have baked in value because who are they going to, where are they going to go? Where they have done the worst job of team building the last few years. Like the times when they should be selling and rebuilding, they don't do it. The times they're buying DeAndre, like what are they doing with these contracts now? It's just a weird kind of vibe going out of Tennessee. But yeah, I think so. I mean, would you give up a first for him though? You're probably not giving up a late first for Levis, or no?
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't really want to. I mean, I'd load up a second and some other stuff and feel like, if you want to
It's
get
not
out of
happening
Levis,
now. It would have happened last
yeah.
week or 2 weeks ago, but it's not happening now. So that's one of those things you just kind of have to let it ride. And that's just kind of where you're at in terms of him. Real quick, we'll talk about these very quickly. Aiden O'Connell's out there kind of throwing the football. Clayton Tune's out there not throwing the football. I mean, he's throwing to other people. I don't know what's going on with Clayton Tune. Tyson, I don't want to talk about him. Hendon Hooker is still out there somewhere. I don't know. He's rehabbing. Sean Clifford, and then we have Anthony Richardson, who is injured, but he's still getting moved in a lot of deals that I see. So what's happening right now? You have a lot of teams out there where there's some teams that are just kind of like they know they're rebuilding, or they know they're buying, or whatever the case may be, and they're like, hey, I have Anthony Richardson I can throw in. I'm not going to throw in. It just kind of depends in terms of this. Anything on these last guys that you kind of want to talk about, Christian?
Aiden O'Connell might be a thing because we just talked about a rough path to a quarterback in terms of like how the roster is built. I think the Raiders kind of fall into that, and it's very clear that they are done with Jimmy Garoppolo already. And O'Connell has looked fine when he's been out there. I'd argue good. He can throw a deep ball, so that's an interesting one. I think you can get him fairly cheap right now, and I think his dynasty ranking is probably too low for what the market kind of suggests he should be valued at. Tyson Bagent's going to be a backup for a long time. That's all I have to say about Tyson Bagent. He's not.
Yeah, and I mean, Hendon Hooker had a lot of momentum on him, but I think that we've seen. I mean, they're not going to bench Jared Goff for Hendon Hooker, and so Hendon Hooker, I think, could be just stuck in a situation where they're riding out his rookie contract with him as a backup quarterback. Sean Clifford is might be interesting given what Jordan Love has shown, because they have no long-term commitment to Jordan Love. And so if they get to the point here in another couple weeks and that offense isn't showing anything, maybe they give Clifford a chance, and that might be an under the radar move. Like, I made the hot take of calling Brock Purdy, Bryce, comping him to Bryce Young, but maybe that's the 2023 answer to Brock Purdy, where he came on very late in the season. They put Sean Clifford in, and if he can make some things work that Jordan Love isn't making work, and you just pick him up for free in your Superflex league. So if you're in a deep league, you got an open roster spot, he might be one worth stashing.
Yep. Good stuff. All right. The full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, head over to your favorite podcast app and make sure you subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.